George pursued me, so much so that the entire city knew about it. He was once rebellious and wild, but for my sake, he softened his edges, clumsily trying to change. Everyone said he was madly in love with me, but no one knew the truth. The day my sister returned to the country, he pinned her against the corner and kissed her fervently. Then, in a rush to explain, he said, "Amelia is just your stand-in. How could I ever love her? As long as she's around, no one will set their sights on you." Chapter 1. The day Diana returned to the country just happened to be my birthday. George texted me, saying something had come up and he needed to meet with an important shareholder. He asked me to take his place and entertain a client. "This deal is crucial. There can't be any mistakes," he reassured me. "Honey, you're the only one I trust." A few years ago, George Hahn had a falling out with his father and stormed out of the Hahn family home. I stood by him as he started from scratch, working our way up together. I knew how much he valued the company he had built from the ground up. I could hear the anxiety and guilt in his voice, so I didn't question him. The client I was meeting had some past disputes with George, and it was clear he wasn't coming with good intentions. Seeing that George hadn't shown up, the client decided to make things difficult for me. Whiskey after whiskey went down, the harshness burning my throat and setting my insides on fire. When the deal was finally settled, I excused myself to the bathroom, using it as an escape from the client's wandering hands. But I never expected to run into George there. He was gently cradling a girl in his arms, pressing her into the corner and kissing her with devotion, as if she were the most precious thing in the world. His voice was restrained, yet filled with suppressed emotion. He said, "Diana, we've really missed out on too much time together." Then, in a rush, he explained to her, "Amelia is just your replacement. How could I ever love her? As long as she's around, no one will set their sights on you." I watched as George, standing under the light, suddenly turned red-eyed, looking panicked and lost. I had never seen George like this before. Even during the most difficult times in his career, George had always been the proud and defiant young master at heart. But in front of Diana, he made himself incredibly small. It was as if he was afraid that Diana would reject him. I stood in the corner, watching them kiss passionately, and felt a chill spread through my body. The nausea that I had barely suppressed rose up again. It was disgusting, truly. Chapter 2. Diana is my biological sister, but anyone who's ever met us would shake their heads and sigh. "You two don't seem like sisters at all." Diana is outgoing and generous, while I am gloomy and insecure. In both academics and appearance, Diana always outshone me by a long shot. Even our parents favored her whenever they introduced their daughters. It was always just Diana. I've been invisible for as long as I can remember. The first time I really caught anyone's attention was because of George. Back then, the eldest son of the Hahn family pursued me so relentlessly that it became a well-known story in Jiangqing. He pulled me out of my shell and openly told all his friends, "I like Amelia." It was Amelia, not Diana. No one believed it at the time, not even my own parents. They would often pull me aside, their tone anxious and impatient. "Are you blackmailing him with something?" And they had a point. "Diana is so much better than you. Who in their right mind would choose you?" It wasn't until George began to soften his edges for me, clumsily trying to change, that they finally believed. George really did love me. Well, it's good that Amelia has someone who loves her. Later, Diana went abroad to study. Before she left, she said something to me. Her eyes held an emotion I couldn't understand. It wasn't until much later that I realized it was called pity. Chapter 3. The two of them stayed together for a while before leaving, and throughout the entire time, George's eyes were only on Diana. He didn't even glance back. If George had turned his head, he would have seen me standing in the corner. But Diana saw me. She shot me a smug smile and then affectionately linked arms with George. The vibration of my phone pulled me out of my thoughts. It was my only friend from high school. She complained, "I know you don't like Diana, but even if this reunion is partly to welcome her back, we were still classmates. Did you really not plan on showing up?" Class reunion? I was stunned. When was I notified? Just a few days ago. The class president even sent personal invitations by text. I instinctively checked my messages, but I couldn't find the invitation. However, Lisa said I had declined it. The only person who had access to my phone was George, so I called her directly. Sorry, I actually happen to be free today. Where are you guys? Lisa happily gave me the address. Chapter 4. When I entered the banquet hall, George and Diana were being egged on by the crowd to share a long-awaited reunion hug. Diana laughed and graciously opened her arms towards George, poised and confident. Lisa, standing nearby, was about to explode with anger. When she saw me come in, her eyes lit up, and she deliberately pulled me close, loudly saying, "His real girlfriend is right here. It's not exactly appropriate to be hugging another woman in front of everyone, don't you think?" Someone muttered, "Haven't they broken up yet?" And the atmosphere instantly became awkward. When George saw me, a flash of surprise and panic crossed his face, but he still walked toward Diana and gave her a polite, distant hug. Then they quickly separated. "We're just old friends who haven't seen each other in a while," Diana said to me with a smile, joking. "Besides, George will be my brother-in-law soon, so don't get the wrong idea." George's body stiffened for a moment. He walked over to me, affectionately draping his arm around my shoulders as if the lies from before had never existed. With a defiant smirk, he said, "That's right. Amelia is my wife. Anyone who says something that upsets her will have to deal with my fists." I could hear the frustration in George's voice. As he spoke, his gaze never left Diana, and his grip on my shoulder was painfully tight. Everyone burst into laughter. I smiled through the pain, but I didn't say a word. Thanks to this scene, no one continued teasing George and Diana. However, they also deliberately avoided me. That was until someone who had once pursued Diana suddenly asked, "I heard you got married abroad?" Diana's calm smile froze on her face. Chapter 5. My relationship with Diana has always been distant, but I've always known that she is a proud and self-assured person. Hearing the comment, I was slightly surprised and glanced at her. "I have a friend abroad who saw Diana and her husband," the man continued, his tone laced with malicious pity. "But Diana, why did you marry that foreigner without even knowing the full story? My friend says he may be rich, but he's old and has a bunch of illegitimate kids to deal with. I don't remember the Sue family falling on such hard times. How could you? Have you said enough?" George slammed his glass down, his voice seething with anger. He glared coldly at the man. "Do you need my help to shut your mouth?" The room fell into an uneasy silence. The class president quickly stepped in, trying to ease the tension. "Mr. Han sure cares about his old friends," the man sneered. Her own sister didn't even step in to defend her. But here you are, all worked up on her behalf as her future brother-in-law? At this, more people began exchanging strange glances. All right. I saw Diana clench and unclench her fists, though her smile remained poised. "Thank you for your concern, but I know what I'm doing. It's not for anyone else to comment on." True enough. The man raised his glass and walked toward Diana, extending his hand as he spoke. After all, the famous Sue campus beauty is doing great in that world, even earning the affection of her husband's illegitimate children. "I still think about you often, Sue Beauty. Why don't you come with me? I wouldn't mind." Before he could finish, the man let out a scream. "I told you, if you can't control that mouth of yours, I'll do it for you." George tossed aside the shattered beer bottle in his hand, his expression full of rage. "George!" I gasped, instinctively reaching out to stop him. "Don't ****ing touch me." George, red-eyed, forcefully shook my hand away. I stumbled and fell to the ground. "Amelia!" Lisa cried out in alarm. Shards of glass cut into my palm and arm, and blood began to flow. But George didn't hear, nor did he turn around. He just grabbed the man by the collar, punching him repeatedly in Diana's defense. It wasn't until Diana called out, "George, you've hurt Amelia." It was as if a leash had been pulled on a fierce dog, and George instantly stopped. His raised fist froze in midair. He instinctively turned to look at me. I was being helped up by Lisa, her hands gently pulling me to my feet. George saw my injured hand, and with a look of panic and guilt, he rushed toward me, his voice shaky and filled with remorse. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean." "Don't touch me," I stepped away from George's outstretched hand, watching as he froze in place, and then I gave him a faint smile. Softly, I asked, "George, it seems like Diana is scared. Shouldn't you go comfort her?" Chapter 6. No one expected me to react like this. Even Lisa couldn't help but gently tug on my arm, whispering, "Amelia, don't say things out of anger." The sharp pain in my palm made it difficult to keep up the smile on my face. So I turned to the others, offering an apologetic look. "Sorry, but it seems I'll have to leave early." Only then did the others seem to snap out of it and crowd around, offering their concern. But beneath their words, there was a sense of schadenfreude, as if they were enjoying the drama. They said things like, "It looks serious. Amelia, you should go to the hospital." But they made no move to step aside. Their eyes kept darting toward George and Diana, just like so many times before. As long as the three of us were present, there was always a flurry of gossip. George pursued me so relentlessly that all of Jiangqing knew about it. Everyone said he was madly in love with me, but no one believed he truly loved me. Some even bet on how long it would take for George to dump me and end up with Diana. Yet even after Diana left the country, they never got the answer they wanted. But that didn't stop them from waiting for the drama to unfold. I suddenly grew tired of being the center of this spectacle. So much so that I couldn't even muster the energy to put on a fake smile for George anymore. "How much longer do you plan on standing here, letting everyone laugh at us? What joke?" George frowned deeply, a hint of frustration in his voice. "Amelia, stop saying things in anger. Let's get you to the..." In front of Diana, George instinctively avoided calling me wife. He reached out to take me to the hospital, but Diana's panicked scream interrupted him. No one had noticed that the man George had beaten was sneaking up on Diana. All his rage from the beating was now directed at Diana. "You filthy b***********. The man grabbed her by the hair, holding a steak knife to her face. His expression twisted with malice. "You've got some nerve. Just got back and already hooking up with your sister's boyfriend." He spat viciously, bringing the knife closer to Diana's face. "Let's see how you can look down on me when I mess up that pretty face." I saw George's face change dramatically. Without hesitation, he let go of my hand and rushed toward Diana again, shielding her tightly behind him. He told her in a low voice to close her eyes and not be afraid. With a single kick, the man collapsed, unable to get up again. George, red with fury, kept beating him, not holding back at all. I stood quietly, watching his back, suddenly feeling a wave of disorientation. Chapter 7. George had always been good to me. The once rebellious and untamed eldest son of the Han family had mellowed for my sake. He distanced himself from his rowdy friends and stopped racing cars or going to bars, all because of a single word from me. He even clumsily learned how to cook because of my stomach issues and insisted I eat breakfast. Whenever people teased him for being whipped, George would confidently sling his arm around my shoulders and retort, "I'm happy to do it." Then, he'd pout and seek my approval. "Honey, they're just jealous of me." He proudly declared his affection for me. Everyone believed that George was head over heels in love with Amelia. But now I realize, it was all just a way to protect Diana. Old Mr. Han had made many enemies in his younger years with his ruthless tactics. And George, having inherited his father's temper, was equally reckless. The worst incident happened when I was kidnapped and taken to the mountains. It was only that one time that George was late in finding me. By the time he did, I was on the brink of being assaulted by the enraged kidnapper. That was also the first time I saw George so furious. He completely destroyed that man, turning into an unstoppable force, much like a mad dog, just like now, as he protects Diana. But back then, I was able to stop George. George had listened to me. He had someone else take care of the aftermath. And then, without a word, he gently carried me onto a helicopter. It wasn't until we were alone that George's voice trembled uncontrollably. He was on the verge of tears. Over and over, he kept apologizing. He buried his face in my neck, and his burning tears scorched my heart. So I told George, "This wasn't your fault. You arrived just in time to save me. And I'm grateful." I was the one who willingly accepted George's closeness, so I should have been prepared to face all the risks that came with it. "It's not like that." George's grip on me tightened, It seemed like he wanted to say something, but in the end, he said nothing. All he muttered was, "Amelia, honey, you're such a foolish, kind-hearted idiot." I didn't understand and continued to comfort George. But after that incident, George stopped flaunting his affection for me in front of others. I thought it was his way of protecting me. But now that I think about it, it was because he felt guilty. So, George, you really did feel guilty toward me, didn't you? Chapter 8. The banquet hall was in chaos. No one expected things to escalate this much. Some people went to comfort Diana, others called the police, and a few dialed for an ambulance. But no one dared to step in and stop the enraged George. Except for Diana. She rushed forward, hugging George, her voice trembling as she called out to him, "George, it's enough, stop." And so, George stopped. I watched coldly as George turned around, holding Diana and whispering softly to comfort her. This hug was much more natural and intimate than the one I had witnessed earlier. "Amelia." Lisa instinctively gripped my arm, her voice filled with concern. "It's fine." I no longer looked at the two of them and turned to leave. "It's fine." From the moment I heard George say, "With her around, no one will target you," I should have understood. To George, Diana was always the most important person. Maybe it wasn't just George. I should have realized this long ago. It was my own foolishness. Foolishness that led me to believe that being constantly compared and discarded would finally wake me from the 5-year dream I'd woven. It hurt. It hurt so much, but it hurt enough to make me fully awake. Chapter 9. I don't know if George came home that night or not. I packed my things and moved out, staying temporarily at a hotel. But I soon realized that I couldn't completely avoid seeing George. After all, the company was something we had built together. I could live without George, but I couldn't bear to let go of DX. Yet for several days in a row, George didn't show up at the company. Even his secretary came to me several times, trying to subtly ask about him. Meanwhile, Diana, who had long blocked me from her social media, suddenly became very active. The most eye-catching post was a picture of a birthday cake. The cake was beautiful, and the hand cutting it wore a couple's ring identical to mine. Underneath the post, a flood of people wished Diana a happy birthday and welcomed her back to the country. Among the well-wishers, one comment stood out. "After all this time, you two finally ended up together." And Diana only responded to that one comment, although it was just a vague smiley face. I quietly stared at Diana's reply, and it confirmed what I had already known. Everyone knew that George would inevitably choose Diana in the end. Everyone but me. The transformation of the ugly duckling into a swan only happens in fairy tales. Reality is far more cruel. No matter how hard I had tried, before I could turn off my phone, a call came in. It was my mother. She started in with her usual tone of near accusation. "Why didn't you come back for Diana's birthday the other day? She's finally back in the country. And as her younger sister, you didn't even wish her a happy birthday. Do you know how hurt she feels?" I quietly listened to my mother's biased ramblings. When she paused to catch her breath, I said, 5 days ago was my birthday, but no one remembered." My mother fell silent. It was as if she had gotten stuck, unable to say a single word for a long time. Chapter 10. What do you mean by that? Her voice became more agitated. "Don't be upset." I smiled, trying to calm her down. "I wasn't trying to blame you. Of course, I'm not in a position to blame you either. After all, her favoritism wasn't a one-time thing. The year I was born, my father had an affair. When my mother found out, she was heavily pregnant and went to confront the mistress, which led to my premature birth. During labor, complications arose, and the natural delivery turned into an emergency C-section. My mother had always been vain, but along with her stretch marks, she now had an ugly scar on her stomach. She couldn't accept it and even developed postpartum depression. During that difficult time, it was obedient and understanding Diana who helped her heal. And every time my mother saw me, she was only reminded of the ugly scar on her body and the pain caused by my father's affair. So when my mother showed favoritism, everyone would tell me to be more understanding. "Amelia, your mother went through a lot to give birth to you. You should be more considerate." so I learned to understand my mother and to turn a blind eye to her favoritism. But in reality, this understanding only resulted in me not even having my own birthday. At first, it was to avoid trouble, so my mother made me and Diana celebrate together. My birthday was postponed to celebrate Amelia's birthday. But over time, there was only one crown, and only one person received birthday wishes. They eventually forgot when my birthday even was. So I said to my mother, with George celebrating her birthday, I would have only upset her by being there. Don't bring George into this. My mother's tone grew harsh. You were never a match for George. Who knows what tricks you used to deceive him? She kept talking, but I couldn't hear a word. I just held the phone, staring blankly at the floor, feeling a coldness wash over me. It took a long while before I found my voice again. So after all these years, you still think I don't have a single quality that could make George love me? Isn't that the case? My mother said impatiently. Do you really think you're better than Diana? If you ask me, George and Diana are the perfect match, even though I had been the one by George's side for all these years, taking care of him. My mother still believed I was no match for Diana, so I blinked back the dry pain in my eyes, smiled, and softly said, You're right. George should be with Diana, just like how, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't make you love me even a little more. How could George ever truly fall for me? I'm really sorry. I struggled to keep my emotions in check, though my voice trembled occasionally. That after all these years, I still couldn't be as good as Diana. But if I had the choice, I wouldn't want to be your daughter. Saying those words brought a sense of relief I had never felt before. I wasn't needed by anyone. And in turn, I had learned not to need anyone either. I had grown up lonely but resilient. You see, I'm doing just fine now. But I didn't get to hear my mother's response, because Diana took the phone from her. She said, Amelia, let's talk. Chapter 11. I refused Diana's request to meet. She wasn't ready to give up. So she sent me 2 photos. One was of George at a restaurant. Through the window in the background, the Eiffel Tower stood tall. Diana had studied in Paris before. The second photo was a professional business shot of Diana. She was holding DX's upcoming new product. That photo hit me harder than the first. I stared at it for a long time before finally asking Diana, What are you trying to say? DX. Diana Zandra. Diana called me directly, her voice full of amusement. There's no one more suitable than me to be the face of DX's new product. Don't you think? I had always been responsible for the promotion and the spokesperson for DX's new releases. We had originally signed the rising film star Daniela for this campaign. To secure her, I had spent 6 months following her to filming locations, traveling through remote mountains and deserts, pouring in significant effort to finally win her over. And now, just like that, Diana was replacing her so easily. I need some recognition after just returning to the country. So George gave me this opportunity. I heard you were in charge of the spokesperson, so I'll need you to reach out and handle the cancellation. Diana spoke with the tone of someone in charge. At the end of the call, she casually added, as if in passing, Oh, and I heard you were kidnapped and taken to the mountains before? No wonder George rushed back that day. Chapter 12. George was back. He acted like nothing had happened, complaining playfully, asking where I'd gone. His voice was thick with drunkenness. Honey, I feel awful. I could tell he was drunk. There was no point in arguing with a drunk, so I hung up and blocked all of George's contact information. But he came straight to the company. Everyone in the office watched as George rushed into my office, looking flustered and anxious, carefully asking, Honey, are you mad at me? I told my assistant, Lee, to close the door on her way out, dispersing the crowd of curious onlookers. Then I told George, I'm not angry. I had no reason to be angry with someone who no longer mattered to me. George stiffened, but he quickly recovered, pulling a beautifully wrapped box from his pocket, his eyes shining as he looked at me. Honey, look, a birthday gift. It was custom made, so it's a little late. George nervously licked his lips, anxiously assuring me, but I swear I didn't forget your birthday on purpose. I promise. I lowered my eyes to the box in his hand and suddenly remembered something. The moment that led me to agree to be with George. Chapter 13. Growing Up. If there was one thing I could surpass Diana in, it was academics. So when Diana casually said, "I wish I could go to and from school with Amelia," my mother insisted I skip a grade to be in the same class as her. It was all to help take care of Diana, who was focused on her arts exams. At first, everyone paid special attention to me because I was Diana's sister. But soon, they lost interest. I was dull and boring, nothing but a bookworm who buried her head in studies. Completely the opposite of Diana. What's more, they picked up on Diana's dislike for me. And so, they started bullying me. George was once one of them, but one day, he suddenly stood in front of me, boldly and arrogantly telling those bullies, "Amelia is under my protection from now on." He started bringing me breakfast, asking me for help with homework, saying he wanted to go to the same university as me. He even admitted to his friends, "Yeah, I like Amelia." No one believed him, not even me, until one day on my birthday, George forcibly dragged me out of evening study. On the dark school playground, he pulled out a birthday cake he had prepared and lit the candles. "Happy birthday!" The faint candlelight illuminated the fine sweat on his nose. His eyes sparkled as he made a promise, "I'll celebrate every birthday with you from now on." That was the first birthday I'd ever had that was truly mine. And it was because of that promise. It was because of that promise that after our college entrance exams, I agreed to be with George. And I stood by him through 5 incredibly difficult years. But George broke his promise in the end. Though, I guess he didn't really break it. After all, the promise had been built on lies from the very beginning. Chapter 14. Honey, aren't you going to open it? George's tentative voice pulled me out of my thoughts. I didn't look at him. "There's no need to open it." How could there be no need to open it? George sounded panicked. He opened the box, and inside lay a delicate ring. In just half a month, George and I were supposed to get married. He looked at me with a hopeful expression. "You said before that the ring wasn't right, so I had a new one custom made. Try it on." As he spoke, George reached out, trying to put the ring on my finger. I quickly pulled my hand back, the motion so abrupt that it knocked the ring out of George's hand. "Don't touch me." I realized, in that moment, that I hated George's touch more than I had ever imagined. I hated it so much that I couldn't control the urge to retch. The ring rolled onto the floor. George stood there, staring at it blankly. After a long pause, he forced a smile. "How could I be so clumsy? I can't even hold on to something." He crouched down and carefully picked up the ring, his eyes red when he looked up. "Honey, don't call me that." I cut him off, and then I told him, "George, you disgust me. So please, don't touch me anymore." I spoke each word clearly. George stared at me, the color draining from his face little by little. "You're still angry, aren't you?" He suddenly laughed softly. "Because I protected Diana that day. You're mad, right?" George said he once thought he still loved Diana, but those days with her, "I couldn't stop dreaming about you." I started to reject Diana's touch, and it made me feel awful, so unbearably awful. I thought I'd be happy when Diana came back, but when I faced her, all I felt was frustration. He said he spent 5 days confirming that he didn't love Diana. He was just unwilling to let go. George looked at me, his voice choking. "Amelia, I think I've really fallen in love with you." He called my name over and over, each time followed by "I'm sorry." The once proud man was practically kneeling at my feet, completely undone. So, I sighed and crouched down to look at him. George thought I had forgiven him, and his eyes lit up with hope, but I just told him, "George, falling in love with someone stand-in to shield them from danger, don't you think that's pathetic?" George's lips trembled, but he couldn't get a word out. It was as if the last bit of his pretense had been torn away, exposing the dirty truth underneath. Chapter 15. George began sending me flowers. Bouquet after bouquet of red roses arrived at my office. Along with the flowers came a homemade bento box from George. 3 meals a day, without fail. But George didn't dare show up in front of me himself. He had assistant Lee deliver everything. Vice President Sue is so lucky. Mr. Han treats her so well. Yeah, I heard Mr. Han used to be quite the playboy, but he changed his ways bit by bit for Vice President Sue. Listening to my colleagues' envious remarks made me feel like I was back in school. It was the same back then, praising George's devotion, envying my supposed good fortune. So, I told my assistant to distribute the roses. I'm allergic to pollen. If you like them, take them. One of the girls immediately smiled and grabbed a rose. Well, I'll take some of Vice President Sue's good luck. Maybe I'll find a man as great as Mr. Han. I want one too. The large bouquet of roses was soon divided among them, leaving only a few scattered leaves. I looked down at the bento box on my desk, and in front of everyone, I threw it into the trash. Ignoring their shocked and confused expressions, I smiled and shrugged. I'm allergic to bento boxes. At that moment, everyone realized something was off, especially the girls holding the roses, who suddenly looked awkward. Don't worry about it. These flowers are expensive. It'd be a waste to throw them away. I reassured them. Amelia, did you and Mr. Han have a fight? One of the girls, who was closer to me, asked timidly. We didn't fight. I saw George standing behind my colleagues, staring blankly at the roses in their hands. His eyes fell on the familiar packaging in the trash, and his eyes reddened again. So, I looked at George and chuckled softly. I just have a better option now. Chapter 16. I handed George my resignation. In truth, ever since I found out that George hid things from me, even breaking a contract just to make Diana the spokesperson, I no longer wanted anything to do with DX. George really knew how to disgust me. The company I had poured my heart into, the one I had nurtured and watched grow, had always been just a gift prepared for Diana from the start. With my sudden resignation and no proper handover of my projects, George was forced to take over. The breach of contract with the spokesperson and his rivalry with other companies kept him too busy to come looking for me, which gave me the perfect opportunity to gather information about Diana's time abroad. It seemed George had helped Diana cover up some things, as my initial search hit some roadblocks. So, I reached out to the man George had beaten up at the class reunion, because he had tried to hurt Diana. His small company had been crushed by George, leaving him in ruins. When he saw me, the man wasn't surprised. He readily handed over the information he had saved, then told me one more thing. The day before George stepped in to protect her, I saw him confess his love to Diana, but Diana rejected him. As he said this, his voice dripped with malicious glee. What a pitiful fool. Huh? George only used you to get back at Diana. He clearly expected me to get angry or upset. But unfortunately for him, I didn't. I won't waste my emotions on someone irrelevant. I smiled at him. Seems your plan fell through. George had always teased me, calling me a kind-hearted fool, saying my patience had no limits. But he didn't know that I hold grudges. Chapter 17. I wasn't surprised George found out where I was staying, but I was a little taken aback by how quickly he showed up. Honey. George instinctively took 2 steps toward me but then forced himself to stop. He stood a few steps away, smiling nervously. Why did you come home so late? The security in this neighborhood isn't that great. It could be dangerous for a girl to come home alone at night. How about I get you a new place? If you don't have enough money, I can. Dangerous? I cut him off, my smile full of mockery. Shouldn't it be safer than being around Mr. Han? After all, those people will use any means necessary to threaten you. George immediately shut his mouth, his face pale. He probably hadn't rested well in a while. His eyes were bloodshot, and his shirt was wrinkled. Amelia, George said, his voice nearly pleading as he looked at me with desperation. Can you give me a chance to make it up to you? I know I lied to you. I know I did so many awful things, and I know I hurt you. But, Amelia, can't you give me just one more chance? By the time he finished, his voice was thick with tears. He looked at me, his eyes filled with deep sorrow. I didn't say a word. I simply walked past him and headed upstairs. George's gaze dimmed, but he didn't follow. After that, George came looking for me a few more times, but I coldly sent him away each time. I thought that with his pride, he wouldn't continue to humiliate himself, until the night I came home late and encountered a robber. There wasn't much of value in my bag, but inside was an offer letter from a new company. Instinctively, I refused to let go, making the robber think there was something valuable in it. He started pulling harder. That's when George showed up. He fought with the robber. And in the end, the furious thief stabbed George with a knife. But throughout the struggle, George never let go of my bag. The robber fled in fear. George looked at me, struggling to hand me my bag, then smiled. Amelia, look. Chapter 18. I took George to the hospital. Even in his unconscious state, he clung tightly to my hand. So, I was forced to stay by his side. The robber must have panicked too because the stab wound wasn't deep, and George regained consciousness fairly quickly. The first thing he did when he woke up was look for me. I'm just glad you're okay. George smiled at me, but as soon as he spoke, large tears rolled down his face. Everyone else in the room quietly stepped out. I was so scared something would happen to you. George wiped at his tears clumsily, desperately trying to keep himself from looking so pathetic. His voice trembling. I saw the knife, and my heart nearly stopped. I listened quietly, even as George's words became more disjointed and frantic. Then, as George gradually fell silent, I opened the ring box he always carried with him. I put on the ring. It fit perfectly, as if it had been custom-made for me. I smiled at George. The ring is beautiful, and I watched as the light in George's eyes began to shine again, bit by bit. Chapter 19. It seemed like George and I had reconciled. He was even more clingy than before, treating me with even more caution. It was as if he was trying to make up for everything he had done wrong, and it was as if the whole situation with Diana had never happened. George cautiously tested my attitude toward him, terrified that I would get angry, constantly lowering himself. I hadn't gone back to DX either. George had hesitantly asked if I wanted to return, and I refused. He paused, then awkwardly tried to cover it up. It's fine. I can take care of you. There's so much work at the company, and I don't want you to be so exhausted. I smiled and said nothing. The wedding that had been planned long ago proceeded as scheduled. George was overjoyed when I agreed. As the wedding approached, I remained indifferent, as if it were none of my concern, because George had taken on all the responsibilities himself. All the original plans for the wedding were scrapped and redone. He seemed terrified something would go wrong, so he handled everything personally. Even the wedding dresses were selected after much deliberation by George, and he sent over a few options for me to choose from. This one, I casually picked one without even looking closely. I didn't even bother to try it on. George's excited smile froze. He stared at the dress, lost in thought, but eventually smiled and nodded. That's the one I liked too. I knew we were in sync. He had the dress taken away. You only need to look beautiful as my bride, he said, kissing me lightly, his eyes slightly red. I promise I'll treat you better than anyone ever could, he vowed with all seriousness. I smiled and murmured in agreement, silently watching George's figure as he left. So, George, you still don't understand me. If I didn't even want to try on the dress, how could I ever agree to be your bride? Chapter 20. On the day of the wedding, George's smile never left his face, until he saw Diana walking toward him in a white wedding dress, a joyful smile on her face. Behind her, the flower girl was the child of George's best friend. On Diana's hand was a wedding ring. It was the same ring I had tried on before but found didn't fit. In truth, the wedding ring George had prepared for so long just wasn't meant for me. George, Diana called out to him, her eyes brimming with tears. We're finally together. No, not you. George seemed to snap back to reality. Panic filled his face as he frantically searched for me. Where's my wife? Where's Amelia? Where did she go? Diana, did you force her to leave me again? He grabbed Diana's shoulders, nearly snarling through gritted teeth. How can it be you? How could it ever be you? Diana's usual perfect smile froze. George, you're hurting me. She frowned, softening her voice. Weren't you always waiting for me? Now that I'm back, shouldn't we be together? No, I only want Amelia. George shoved Diana to the ground, completely ignoring the murmurs of the crowd as he tried to rush out to find me. And at that moment, the screen behind them lit up. Diana appeared on the screen. She looked younger and more beautiful than she did now. In high school, Diana had been sweet and gentle, the dream girl of many. But in the video, she was smiling as she ordered people to strip a girl and burn her with cigarettes, leaving scars on her skin. All because the girl had accidentally spilled water on Diana's dance shoes. Amelia? Diana tilted her head with a soft smile, her voice still gentle. She's just a worthless brat that no one cares about. You can have some fun with her. It's not like my mom likes her anyway. Even if Amelia ends up dead, I'll just say a few words, and my mom won't be too upset. As the video played, I noticed my mother in the audience, her body stiffening. Her eyes were glued to the screen, filled with disbelief, as if she didn't recognize the daughter she had always loved. It had taken me a long time to find these videos. Before Diana left the country, she had asked people to cover up her sordid past. But the things people do always leave traces. The latter part of the video showed Diana's life abroad. She had married an older man, and to inherit his fortune, she seduced his illegitimate son and plotted his death. Diana panicked. She frantically tried to turn off the video, but George stopped her, ignoring her cries and pleas. George coldly made her watch the entire thing. By the time the video ended, the police had arrived. I had called them. Diana's face was streaked with tears, her carefully crafted appearance now a mess and almost comical. It wasn't me. I didn't do any of this. It's all a lie. It's all a setup. She screamed, her voice hoarse as she broke down in tears. I saw her break free and run toward my mother, but my mother only stared at her in horror, as if she were looking at a terrifying stranger. Diana suddenly stopped in her tracks. I didn't bother watching the rest of the farce. I turned and left. Enough was enough. Chapter 21. Diana was already set as the spokesperson for DX's new product. After her scandal broke, DX's image plummeted, and their stock prices took a nosedive. But I had already sold my shares to George's competitor long ago. The rival company seized the opportunity, relentlessly going after George. The next time I saw George was after I returned from my trip. He had lost a lot of weight, and a gloomy, sad aura clung to him. Amelia! George's voice was hoarse. He tried to reach for my arm but froze under my cold gaze. I told you before. You're filthy. Don't touch me, I said flatly, and then added, George, acting like this will make Diana very sad. You waited for her for so many years, protected her for so many years, even though she's facing her punishment and going to prison now. I'm sure you love her so much that you'll still wait for her, right? George's body swayed slightly. His voice was strained. I'm not waiting for her, but honestly, sometimes I'm quite envious of Diana. I smiled, pretending not to hear George's words. It seems like all she has to do is stand there, and people line up to love her without her doing anything. We're sisters, but we couldn't be more different. The things I worked so hard for, Diana could get so easily. And even more than I could. Sometimes I feel like life is pretty unfair. I blinked, my eyes feeling dry, but it seemed like a weight had been lifted off my chest. But so what? Amelia is just Amelia. Even if I don't have anyone else, I'll still be fine. Haven't I always managed before? Amelia! George's voice became urgent as he called out to me. It seemed he had realized something, and despite worrying about making me angry, he grabbed my wrist, his gaze full of pain and desperation. Please, please don't say any more. Ignoring his pleas, I told George, one word at a time. George, you probably never knew how much I once loved you. Once upon a time, I had loved you with all my heart. I saw you as my only lover, my only friend, my only. I paused and softly breathed out the words, salvation. I would never forget the figure that stood in front of me when others isolated and bullied me, nor that one happy birthday under the night sky. I was grateful that during my hardest times, it was George who was by my side. He had taken me out of that suffocating home and told my mother, since you dislike Amelia so much, please don't disturb her anymore. I will respect her, care for her, and give her everything she wants, even though it was all based on a lie. But now I've realized that the only person who can save me is myself. George's grip wasn't strong, so I easily pulled my hand free. I smiled at him. Pinning your hopes and dreams on someone else is too risky. Saying it didn't hurt would be a lie. Even though I had told myself that over and over, I couldn't help the bitterness that rose as I said those words. Isn't it true that everyone longs to be loved? It's just that I wasn't lucky enough. I blinked away the tears threatening to fall. forcing back the urge to cry. George, if you really want to make it up to me, stay far away from me. Don't let me see you again. I still couldn't forgive George. Amelia. George's breathing became ragged, his whole body trembling. I have nothing left. The Hahn family won't abandon you. The rival company had clamped down hard, and the company's cash flow was cut off. In the end, the Hahn family stepped in. I shattered George's illusion and told him, I once had nothing too, but I survived. Maybe it was tough, but it was still better than most people's lives. George fell silent. After a long pause, he asked, his voice choked with tears, why did we end up like this? I was so close to holding on to you. Because you don't love me. I gave him the reason. I never believed in excuses about hurting someone you love because of some hidden reason or secret. Even little kids know that when they like someone, they save their teacher's candy to give to that person. They know how to make the person they like happy, to see them smile, to try and make that person like them too. So, George, you never really liked me. Each word was like a final judgment. Chapter 22. George never came to see me again. Maybe he did, but he didn't appear in front of me. Later, I heard that the Hahn family had forcibly taken him back. The old man was furious, using every means at his disposal to force George into a marriage alliance. George simply gave up. He often drank himself into a stupor, and one day, while driving drunk, he got into a car accident. The Hahn family used all their resources to get him out of trouble, but George would never walk again. After that, I traveled to many places, met many people, and made many new friends. They showed me a whole new world, and my growth no longer felt so painful. When I returned, I found out that my parents had divorced. After a lifetime of fighting, they finally tore each other apart. In the end, they even had a physical altercation during the separation, and my mother was pushed to the ground and sent to the hospital. My father moved in with his old mistress, and they lived happily as a family. When I went to visit my mother, I found out she had developed some form of dementia. She didn't even recognize me anymore. While I was caring for her, she suddenly grabbed my hand and stared at me for a long time before saying, "You look a lot like my daughter, Diana." I smiled as I pulled my hand away and shook my head. I'm nothing like her. No, not Diana, not her. My mother shook her head frantically, muttering, I have another daughter. But what's her name? Her name is. She couldn't remember my name, only pounding her head in frustration. I stopped her and said, You only have one daughter. Her name is Diana. Is that so? She stared at me blankly, her expression full of trust. Yes, I smiled. I hired a nurse to take care of her at the hospital. But I didn't visit her again. Amelia has her own life to live, even if the path ahead isn't easy. But I will continue to grow, strong and alone. Maybe someday I'll meet someone who needs me, and who I need as well. Who knows?